They say betrayal cuts deepest from the ones closest to you. I found out just how true that was on my 30th birthday. We were at Mirabelle, one of those rooftop restaurants where the wine costs more than your groceries for the week and the waiters pretend you're royalty. My husband Nathan booked it all himself. Told me I deserved something elegant. Told me it was going to be a night I'd never forget. He was right about that, at least. Everyone was there. My parents, Nathan's sister and her husband, a couple of our old college friends, and of course, my sister Emily. She swept in late, glowing, like she always does. Emily never walks, she enters. All eyes on her. She sat next to me, kissed my cheek, and flashed that Hollywood smile. The waiter came with the champagne just as they brought out the chocolate soufflé with the little sparkler in it. To Clara, someone toasted. Then Emily stood up, glass in hand. I have a surprise of my own, she said, resting a hand on her belly. I'm pregnant. Gasps, claps, congratulations. But she wasn't done. And the father, she turned and smiled at Nathan, is right here. I didn't react. Not with tears, not with a gasp. Just a quiet blink, like I was watching someone else's drama unfold. Nathan's smile froze, then slipped. My mother's mouth dropped open. My father cleared his throat like he was about to vomit. Emily was still smiling, clearly expecting chaos, maybe even a scene. But I'd come prepared. I reached into my purse and slid a white envelope across the table. I was saving this for after dessert, I said, voice calm. But it seems now's the right time. Nathan stared at the envelope like it was ticking. Fertility tests, I said, holding his gaze. You remember, Nathan? The ones you took at Dr. Halvorson's last month? I had a follow-up last week. I watched the blood drain from his face. You're infertile, Nathan. 0 motility. No sperm count. Doctor says it's been that way for years. Emily's eyes darted back and forth, her grin wilting like a cut flower. The silence hit like a wave. Then someone dropped a fork. I stood up slowly, smoothed my dress. So either you're not the father, I looked at Nathan, or modern medicine just witnessed its first miracle. And with that, I walked out, leaving the soufflé and the wreckage behind me. That night wasn't the end, it was the beginning. A curtain lifted, and behind it were secrets I'd only started to uncover. I wasn't just betrayed. I was lied to, manipulated, dismissed. And I was done being the quiet wife and the overlooked sister. They wanted a show? Fine. I was going to give them one, with receipts, evidence, and a little help from the law. Let's see how much they enjoyed the spotlight when the truth came out. I didn't cry that night. I drove straight home, kicked off the heels, and poured myself a glass of the cheap red wine Nathan never liked. Sat on the couch, still in my dress, and stared at the wall while the ice in the wine glass melted. Not because I was sad. Because I was thinking. People expect drama from women when they're betrayed. Screaming, tears, slapping someone across the face in public. That's not me. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I pulled out my laptop. I started with Emily. Her social media was locked down tighter than Fort Knox, but she couldn't resist posting baby bump selfies on Instagram. I found one. Caption read, 16 weeks today. Can't wait to meet you, little bean. I did the math. 4 months ago, Nathan and I were in Costa Rica, trying to reconnect. He was drunk most nights and barely touched me. There was no way he'd fathered a child then, not just because of the infertility, but because he wasn't even trying. He'd been distant for almost a year. So I dug deeper. Emily used to date this guy named Derek. They broke up, officially, about 6 months ago. But I remembered something. One night last December, we ran into him at a bookstore. Emily turned white as a sheet. Said she had to go, then practically sprinted to the car. I messaged him on Facebook under a burner account. Asked if he and Emily had been in contact. He didn't answer. But someone else did. A girl named Madison. She'd commented on one of Derek's photos with yikes. Thought you and Emily were done? I clicked her profile and, by some miracle, her posts were public. One in particular caught my eye. It was a picture of Derek and Emily at a concert, timestamped 3 months ago. Emily had claimed she was done with him. That she hadn't seen him in ages. So I reached out to Madison, politely, carefully. I said I was a friend doing some digging on behalf of someone close to Emily, and I needed to know if Emily had been with Derek in the last few months. She replied within the hour. They never really broke up, she said. Emily told Derek she was pregnant, but he didn't want a kid. She was freaking out, said she needed a better option. Haven't heard from her since. So that was it. Emily lied about Nathan being the father, probably hoping to trap him, maybe even get financial support or force a marriage. And Nathan? Well, I still didn't know what his part was in all this. But I was going to find out. 2 weeks passed before I made my next move. In the meantime, Nathan had been sleeping in the guest room. He tried apologizing once, stammered something about not knowing, and Emily said she was on birth control. I didn't say much. Just watched him squirm. He didn't admit to the affair. Not yet. He still thought he could get away with it. But the truth was, he'd been leaving a trail. I found a burner phone in his desk drawer. He hadn't even tried to hide it well. Messages to Emily, yes, but also photos of wire transfers. Large ones. I traced one of the bank accounts to his company's vendor list. He was funneling money. Fraud. I took photos of everything: phone screen, account numbers, text messages. I made copies of documents from his home office, scanned emails, and backed everything up to the cloud. Quietly. Methodically. I wasn't going to destroy him yet. First, I needed more. I contacted a friend of mine who worked in family law. Told her I might need help soon, but I wasn't ready to file anything. She gave me advice on documentation, timelines, evidence handling. Told me to keep everything legal and above board. Then I called a private investigator. Discreet but thorough, I said. I need proof of an affair. And maybe a financial trail. He didn't ask why. Just told me he'd get started. Meanwhile, Emily started slipping. She texted me one day, a fake apology wrapped in sugar. I never meant to hurt you, Clara. But love is messy, you know? Nathan and I didn't plan this. It just happened. Maybe someday you'll understand. I didn't reply. Then my mother called. That was a whole different flavor of betrayal. Emily's pregnant, Clara. She's your sister. She made a mistake, but don't punish the child. Nathan's willing to take responsibility. Like it was settled. Like I was just a roadblock in their happy little ending. I laughed. Couldn't help it. A dry, bitter laugh that made her pause. That's not his child, I said. You'll see. She huffed. You always were dramatic. That's when I knew they'd all picked sides. And it wasn't mine. Good. Let them. The next part of the plan was set for Sunday brunch. Our entire family was going to be there. Nathan. Emily. My mother. Even a few relatives who'd flown in from out of state. They thought I was going to announce a divorce or beg for sympathy. Instead, I was going to turn the table upside down. Literally, if I had to. I wasn't after revenge. I wanted clarity. Truth. And power back in my hands. I was done being the quiet wife, the good sister, the overlooked daughter. Let them watch what happens when you push someone too far. Let them learn what happens when Clara stops playing nice. The brunch was held at my mother's favorite place, a country club so pristine you'd think dust was illegal. Linen tablecloths, waiters in gloves, mimosas in fluted glasses. The kind of place that smelled like money and judgment. I arrived last. Intentionally. Nathan stood when he saw me, out of habit maybe, or guilt. He wore his everything's fine mask, the same one he'd used for years to lie without blinking. Emily looked smug, hand resting on her stomach like she'd swallowed the Virgin Mary. My mother waved from the head of the table, all pearls and false sweetness. I took my seat. Smiled. And waited. They tried to pretend. Asked me about work, how I was feeling, if I was ready to move on. I just nodded. Sipped my water. Let them dig their own graves with their words. And then, when the dessert came, a harmless-looking tiramisu, I reached into my bag. Before we all part ways, I said, I'd like to share a few things. Some housekeeping, if you will. I set a manila folder on the table. Everyone went quiet. First, I pulled out the results from Nathan's second fertility test. Done at a different clinic. Same results. I slid the paper toward Emily. Still claiming he's the father? She went pale. Then red. I didn't wait for her response. Next, I said, unfolding several photos. One was of Emily and Derek, timestamped, exiting a motel. Another was a restaurant receipt with both their names. A third was a text from Derek saying, "You need to stop telling people it's Nathan's. I told you I'm not ready to be a father." My uncle coughed. My mother's face froze. But wait, I said. There's more. I pulled out bank records showing Nathan's embezzlement from his firm, small, repeated vendor payments into a personal account under a fake business name. I passed those down to my cousin, who just happened to be a financial auditor. Then, I pulled out a USB stick. Lastly, a little bonus. I nodded toward the TV mounted in the corner of the lounge. Do you mind? I asked a waiter. He plugged it in. The screen came to life. There was Emily, sitting in our guest bedroom, talking on speakerphone. It was a recording. She didn't know I'd left a hidden camera after the birthday dinner. I had to tell her it was Nathan's. Derek was freaking out. If I pinned it on Nathan, maybe she'd back off, maybe he'd leave her. Silence. She's always had everything. It's my turn. I let it play. Then stopped it halfway. Nobody moved. I'm filing for divorce, I said calmly. And Nathan, your firm's legal department will be receiving an anonymous tip. Nathan looked like he might throw up. Emily, I suggest a paternity test before naming the child after anyone in this room. I stood up. Gathered my papers. Took one long look at my mother. You always said Emily was the clever one, I said. Maybe now you'll realize who was just quieter. I walked out. Left them with their fancy brunch and their broken illusions. That night, I lay in bed, alone for the first time in years, but truly alone, not lonely. I thought about all the times I'd been made to feel small. How many gaslight nights, silent dinners, closed doors I'd endured. I'd been trained to smile, to keep peace, to apologize just for existing. But not anymore. I didn't need vengeance. I needed clarity. And now I had it. My therapist once told me healing doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like silence. Like space. Like not answering the phone. She was right. Divorce proceedings aren't glamorous. They're slow, dry, full of paperwork and tension. But they're honest. That's what I needed. Something official. Documented. Real. Nathan didn't fight much at first. Probably thought he'd walk away clean. That I'd settle quietly, as always. But I'd learned. Silence protects no one but the liar. My attorney, Vanessa, was sharp as broken glass. The kind who doesn't ask how you're feeling, just how you want it handled. I liked that about her. I want the house, I told her. And I want the truth on record. We filed on grounds of infidelity and financial misconduct. Nathan's face when he got served was priceless. I watched from the window as he unfolded the papers outside our gate. His hands trembled. He knew what was in them, the fertility records, the fraud documentation, the video. It wasn't just a divorce. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Meanwhile, Emily tried her own tactics. She showed up at my doorstep one rainy evening, mascara running like her conscience. Said she'd made a mistake. Said she'd do anything to fix things. "I'm still your sister," she whispered. I stared at her, calm. "No," I said. "You're a lesson." I shut the door. Later that week, she called my mother sobbing. Blamed me for ruining her life. Said the baby would grow up without a father now. I didn't respond. She'd made her choices. Let her live with them. Nathan's fraud case broke open faster than I expected. The private investigator I'd hired had uncovered a pattern: vendor kickbacks, fake accounts, offshore whispers. It wasn't just petty theft. It was federal. The firm fired him quietly, hoping to avoid scandal. But someone, not me, of course, tipped off the regulators. A formal investigation followed. My attorney filed a motion to secure my financial share before his assets got frozen. We won. I got the house. Nathan got a subpoena. Funny how life balances the scales when you stop trying to hold them steady for everyone else. The custody claim was a non-issue, thankfully. Emily had officially named Derek on the birth certificate, probably hoping to avoid a DNA test in court. I didn't even bother showing up for that hearing. My part was done. The world now knew what I'd always suspected: Emily lied, Nathan stole, and I survived. After the dust settled, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I took a trip. Just me. Rented a little cabin in the mountains. No reception, no visitors, no noise. Just the sound of wind through pine and my own thoughts, finally unburdened. I sat on the porch each morning with black coffee and no one to please. I read. I walked. I watched the sun come up like it was mine alone. And somewhere in those quiet hours, I realized something. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't make a scene. It slips in like a warm coat, when you finally put down everything that never fit you. After the court dates ended and the paperwork was signed, I expected to feel triumphant. Like I'd crossed some finish line. But what I really felt was empty. Not sad. Not angry. Just hollowed out. I'd spent years being someone else's support beam, Nathan's rock, Emily's shadow, my mother's disappointment. When I walked away from all that, I didn't realize I'd also have to rebuild what was underneath. So I started simple. I went room by room in the house Nathan and I used to share and stripped it of every trace of him. His suits? Donated. The whiskey glasses he loved so much? Gone. I even repainted the walls, not because they needed it, but because I needed to see something new when I woke up. Then I tackled the attic. That's where I found the box. Letters from Nathan to someone named Elle. Not Emily. Another woman. Dated years back. Maybe even before we were married. I didn't read them all. Didn't need to. I'd already dug through enough rot. But I kept one. Just one. A reminder. You never really know someone until you stop needing them. I started therapy. Vanessa recommended a woman named Dr. Hensley. Quiet type. No frills, no candles, no affirmations on the walls. Just a desk, a couch, and questions that made me sweat more than any courtroom ever had. What did you believe about yourself that kept you in that marriage? She asked that on our third session. I couldn't answer right away. My throat went tight. That's when I knew I was finally facing the real problem. It wasn't Nathan. It wasn't Emily. It was me, the version of me that had been trained to make herself small so others could feel big. We worked on that. Slowly. Meanwhile, life crept back in. I joined a book club at the library, not because I cared about the books, but because it was quiet and nobody there knew who I used to be. I picked up gardening, too. Built raised beds with my own hands. tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers. Funny how putting your hands in the dirt can remind you what it feels like to grow something again. I started freelancing, graphic design, branding. Work I used to do in the background while Nathan took the lead. Now it was mine. Clients came slow at first, but word spread. Turns out, people like someone who doesn't sugarcoat the process. One afternoon, a client asked me, "What made you start your own thing?" I just smiled. Needed a life I didn't have to apologize for. By fall, the house felt different. Lighter. Like it belonged to me, not just on paper, but in spirit. One evening, I hosted a small dinner. Just 3 people, Vanessa, Dr. Hensley, and Madison, the woman who'd helped expose Emily and Derek. None of them had met before. But they got along like old friends. We laughed. Talked about nothing and everything. No one asked if I was seeing anyone. No one told me I seemed so much better now. They just let me be. That was new. That was peace. I used to think revenge would make me feel whole. That exposing them would heal me. But it didn't. It cleared the ground. That's all. Healing? That came in smaller moments. In folding fresh laundry without dread. In saying no without explaining. In choosing my life without asking permission. I'm not the same woman who sat at that birthday table, waiting for cake and compliments. I'm someone else now. And for the first time in a long time. I like her. It came on a Tuesday. Plain envelope. No return address. Postmarked 3 towns over. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. My mother's, careful cursive, the kind taught in Catholic schools and polished by decades of passive aggression. Inside was a letter. Not an apology. Just a retelling. I know you feel betrayed, it began. But families go through storms. What Emily did wasn't right, but you must understand how vulnerable she was. She didn't mean to hurt you. She just wanted what you always had. That line sat in my stomach like sour milk. What I always had. I read the rest. A few veiled digs, a plea to reconsider the coldness, and a paragraph about your poor sister raising a baby alone. At the bottom, she signed it like she used to when I was little and in trouble. Love always, Mom. I didn't cry. I didn't tear it up. I didn't write back. I folded it once, placed it in the fire pit out back, and watched it burn slow, like a wound that finally stops bleeding. 2 days later, Emily called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded thin, worn out. Clara, please. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But he left. Derek left. I don't have anyone. That part wasn't surprising. Derek always struck me as the type to sprint when reality showed up in diapers. What followed, though, was quieter. I don't know how to do this. I've never done anything alone. Neither had I, until I did. I didn't call her back. Not out of spite. Just out of preservation. I wasn't going to be the crutch she used to limp through the consequences. That weekend, I visited my father's grave. First time in years. He'd died before any of this mess, heart failure, quick. We weren't close, not really. But he'd always been gentler with me than my mother had. Quiet man, worked with his hands, smelled like motor oil and pipe smoke. I brought him tomatoes from my garden. Sat on the bench nearby. I think you'd be proud of me, I said. Not because I did everything right. But because I finally stopped pretending. The wind kicked up, rustling the leaves above. Felt like a nod. Maybe just coincidence. Maybe not. One night that month, I dreamt of that birthday dinner again. Only this time, when Emily stood to make her announcement, I stood too. Not to shout her down. Not to fight. Just to leave. I woke up smiling. That's when I knew I was truly done. Some people think healing comes with a grand gesture, a phone call, a letter, a reunion at Thanksgiving. But I've learned healing sometimes means no reply. It's in the silence between what they did and what you decide to carry. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away and not look back. It started with a message. A woman named Trina reached out through my freelance site. Said she liked my design work. Said she needed a brand package for a support network she was starting, something for women recovering from emotional abuse and toxic family ties. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I wasn't sure I could step back into that fire without getting burned again. Then she wrote something that changed my mind. We're not trying to rescue anyone. We just want to build a lighthouse. A place for women to see that it's possible to stand again. That line stuck with me. A lighthouse. Not a lifeboat. I knew what that felt like, to flail in the dark, no map, no anchor, no voice telling you that you weren't crazy. I said yes. We started with logos, colors, taglines. But somewhere between mood boards and mission statements, the conversations turned deeper. Trina had been through hell, a husband who controlled her finances, a sister who siphoned her savings, a church that told her forgiveness mattered more than her safety. She'd left with nothing but a duffel bag and her 2 kids. But she'd made it. And now she wanted to create a space for others to land. Eventually, she asked if I'd join the board. Help shape the messaging. Maybe even speak at a few events. I hesitated. Then I thought of that letter from my mother. How her words tried to rewrite the truth. So gently, so convincingly, you'd almost forget it was abuse. And I said yes. Not to spite my past, but to reclaim it. The first event was small, just a room in a downtown library, about a dozen women and a folding table with stale cookies and lukewarm coffee. I didn't give a speech. I just told a story. How betrayal doesn't always come with yelling. Sometimes it comes dressed as concern. As family. As love with strings attached. I talked about the birthday dinner. The soufflé. The envelope. And I watched as every woman in the room leaned in, like I was reading pages from their own lives. One woman cried. Another laughed, bitterly, like she was finally hearing someone say it plain. Afterward, they hugged me. Some whispered thanks. Others just nodded, eyes shining. That's when I understood something I never had before. Surviving isn't the end. It's the beginning of someone else's map. We named the project Stand Still, Rise Strong. Not because standing still means doing nothing, but because sometimes, the bravest thing is not running, not pleasing, not shrinking. Just standing. Long enough to remember who you are. I used to think healing was something you did in private. Behind closed doors. Quietly. Neatly. But I've learned healing can be messy. Loud. Public, even. It can look like sitting in a folding chair across from a stranger and saying, "Me too." It can look like building something that didn't exist when you needed it most. And sometimes, it looks like being the lighthouse, not for applause, not for redemption, but because you know what it feels like to be lost at sea. And you've got a light now. You may as well use it. The email came from a school district. Ms. Clara Bishop, you've been listed as an emergency contact for Elijah Monroe, age 3. My stomach dropped. I knew that name. Emily had mentioned it once, back when she was still trying to guilt me. His name's Elijah. You'd love him. He has your eyes. I hadn't believed her. Thought it was one more manipulation. But now, there it was. Black and white. Official. I called the number listed. A tired-sounding secretary answered. The boy's mother is unreachable, she said. We're trying to contact someone before involving CPS. What happened? I asked. She left him at pre-K this morning. Didn't return. No call. Nothing in his lunch. He's been sitting here for hours. I stared at the wall. I could have said no. Could have let the system take over. God knows Emily had earned every bit of consequence. But that wasn't the kid's fault. I told the woman I'd be there in 20 minutes. He was small. Dark hair, pale skin, big round eyes like I'd had at that age. He didn't cry when he saw me. Just looked up, blinked once, and said, "You came." I don't know what Emily told him about me. If anything. But something about that look, it cracked a wall I didn't know I'd built. I signed the papers. Took him home. Fed him. Let him nap on the couch. And then I called Emily. She didn't answer. I left a message. You don't get to disappear anymore. Not without explanation. Call me. She called at 2 a.m. drunk. Rambling. I needed space. Just space. You don't know what it's like, doing it all alone. I didn't yell. Didn't argue. Just said, you left a 3-year-old without food or a pickup plan. That's not needing space. That's abandonment. She cried. Or tried to. Said she was sorry. Said she'd come by in the morning. She didn't. I kept Elijah for 3 days. I didn't tell anyone, not even Trina or my therapist. It felt fragile. Like speaking it would make it too real. He was quiet, polite, careful. The kind of careful that only comes from a child who's already learned not to be a burden. That broke me more than anything else. On the 4th day, Emily showed up. Sunglasses, messy hair, excuses spilling from her lips. I didn't mean to vanish. I just had a rough week. Some bills. Some stuff with Derek. He's back, you know. Said he wants to try again. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. You're not taking him. She flinched. Clara, he's my son. Then act like his mother. She tried to push past me. I didn't move. Just handed her a piece of paper, a temporary custody agreement. My lawyer had prepared it overnight. I'm filing for temporary guardianship. I already talked to CPS. She laughed. You? Taking my child? I'm not taking him, I said. I'm protecting him. From you. Until you're stable. Until there's food in his bag. Until he doesn't flinch when someone raises their voice. She looked ready to explode. But she didn't. Instead, she slumped against the doorframe and whispered, "Do you hate me that much?" No, I said. I just love him more than I'm afraid of you. 2 weeks later, a court date was set. Emily didn't show. The judge granted me temporary custody pending review. CPS conducted a home visit. Elijah stayed with me. At bedtime, he asked if he could call me Auntie C. I said yes. He smiled and said, "I like it here. It's quiet." And I thought, yeah, kid. Me too. I never wanted to be a mother. Not really. Not because I didn't have the instinct, but because I'd spent so long mothering everyone else. But life's funny. It hands you these little broken things, and if you've done the work, if you've cleared enough of your own rubble, you might just have room to hold one more. Not to fix them. Just to give them space to grow. That's all I ever needed too. Just space. And someone who didn't look away. The court date loomed like a storm you can't outrun. My lawyer, Vanessa, laid it all out. You're not just going up against your sister, she said. You're going up against the system, and blood still carries weight, even when it shouldn't. Emily had finally hired representation. Some overworked, underpaid public defender with no stake in the outcome beyond closing the file. But the judge? The judge would want proof. Not pain, not emotion. Paper. So we gathered it. Reports from the daycare about Elijah being left without meals. Photos of his too small shoes, bruises that couldn't be explained. The CPS notes, carefully worded but clear. And then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter. To the judge. Not to sway. Not to beg. Just to explain. I'm not his mother. I didn't give birth to him. But I've seen what happens when a child grows up in a home where love is conditional, where silence is rewarded, and truth is punished. I lived it. He shouldn't have to. Vanessa read it and just said, "It's honest." That's all that matters. The day of the hearing, I wore black. Not because I was mourning. Because I was prepared to bury what was left of my ties to Emily. She showed up late. No makeup, no lipstick, no charm. Just rage tucked behind bloodshot eyes. She didn't speak during the hearing, her lawyer did. Claimed she was struggling, but trying. That no harm was proven. That I was exploiting the situation to steal her child. I didn't respond. Didn't have to. The paper spoke. So did Elijah's drawings, which the court-appointed psychologist submitted with her notes. Stick figures holding hands. Big happy faces on one side. Tiny one, crying, alone, on the other. The judge read the file. Sat in silence for what felt like years. Then he looked at me and said, "Are you prepared for the responsibility this entails?" "I already have it," I said. "All I need now is the name on paper." He granted me permanent guardianship. Not adoption. Not yet. But Elijah would stay with me until the court saw fit otherwise, which, by their own admission, wasn't likely to change unless Emily turned her life around. She stood up to object. But her lawyer stopped her. "Don't make it worse," he muttered. She stormed out. Didn't look at me once. That was the last time I saw her. Back home, Elijah helped me hang a framed certificate on the wall, the legal one. "What does it say?" he asked. "That you're safe," I said. "And that you're home." He smiled, then pointed at the wall beside it. "Can we hang my rocket drawing there too?" "Absolutely. We did it together. Some people say blood is thicker than water. But they forget the rest of the saying, the full one. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose, those forged in trust, in trial, in quiet resilience, matter more than the ones handed to us by birth. I didn't set out to raise a child. But I did set out to protect the truth. Turns out, sometimes those things are the same. Fall came in slow, like an old friend who doesn't knock, just walks in, familiar and quiet. The garden turned gold. Elijah started preschool full-time. I found myself with pockets of silence again, something I hadn't felt in months. One crisp Saturday, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the leaves fall. That's when I noticed the light. The porch light. Still on. I'd left it burning out of habit, part of some unconscious hope, maybe, that someone would come back. That there'd be a knock. A reckoning. An apology. But none of that was coming. And for the first time, I didn't want it to. I walked down the steps, reached up, and flipped the switch. The bulb went dark. And just like that, I let go. That week, I signed the final set of documents for Elijah's full adoption. It was quiet, just me, Vanessa, and a notary in a small office with beige carpet and a view of a parking lot. No fanfare. But when I put my pen down, something clicked inside. It wasn't a climax. It was a release. I walked out of that office not as someone's wife, or sister, or daughter trying to please, but as Clara. Just Clara. A woman who'd been broken open, burned down, and rebuilt brick by damn brick. And now? Now she was somebody's mother. We threw a little celebration. Just a few people, Trina, Madison, Dr. Hensley. Elijah made a cake with too much frosting. I let him. He handed me a card he'd drawn in preschool. On it was a stick figure with a red cape. "Is that me?" I asked, laughing. "No," he said. "That's you. You save people." I swallowed hard. Not people, I said. Just you. Weeks passed. Life settled. I'd expected some cinematic ending, rain on a rooftop, a phone call at midnight, a confession. But it didn't come. Instead, I got something better. Stillness. Not emptiness. Not waiting. Just a deep breath that never ends. I used to think peace was something you earned. Like a prize. After the fight. After the storm. But I've learned it's not something you wait for. Peace is what you build. Slowly. Quietly. In the walls of your own home. In the way you speak to yourself. In how you protect what matters. And sometimes, in flipping off the porch light, when you finally know no one worth waiting for is coming.